Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it. Then let's evaluate together. The air in the cold creative gallery buzzed with the low hum of anticipation, a cocktail of expensive perfume and clinking wine glasses swirling around the sleek, modern space. Overhead, soft lights bathed the room in a golden glow, catching the edges of framed artwork lining the walls. Chicago's art elite milled about, sharp suits, glittering dresses, and sharper tongues, whispering critiques and sizing up the competition. At the center of it all stood Zora Jackson, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She was 25, a black woman from the small town of Willow Creek, Tennessee, with warm brown skin that shimmered under the gallery lights, and a cascade of natural curls tied high in a messy bun. Her deep brown eyes, usually bright with quiet determination, were now clouded with dread. She clutched a note card in her trembling hands, the borrowed black dress hugging her curves in a way that felt foreign, too elegant for the girl who'd grown up in faded jeans. Her painting, a vivid depiction of Willow Creek's golden wheat fields at dusk, hung on the wall behind her, or what was left of it. Red paint streaked across the canvas like blood, ruining the delicate lines she'd poured her soul into. The crowd's murmurs cut through her like knives. Amateur mistake, clumsy, small-town girl out of her depth. Zora's throat tightened, her vision blurring. This was her chance, her shot to prove she was more than the nobody her ex, Caleb Ward, had called her. And now it was slipping away, dripping red onto the polished floor. She wanted to run, to disappear back to the dusty roads of Willow Creek, where no one expected her to shine. But then a voice, low, steady, commanding, sliced through the noise. "Hold on," the man said, stepping to the front of the room. "There's something you need to see." Zora's head snapped up. It was him, the guy from Brew and Grind, the one who'd picked up her pencil a few weeks ago and called her napkin sketch beautiful. His name was Ethan, wasn't it? Ethan Brooks. He stood tall, his dark brown hair neatly combed, his sharp blue eyes scanning the room with an authority that didn't match his plain jacket and jeans. He held a microphone, his presence silencing the crowd as an assistant wheeled out a screen. "This wasn't an accident," Ethan said, his voice carrying a quiet fury. "It was sabotage." The screen flickered to life, showing grainy security footage. A woman, Kayla Pierce, Zora's shift manager at Brew and Grind, slipped into the gallery after hours, a can of red paint in hand. She splashed it across Zora's painting, her smirk clear under the dim lights. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by a wave of murmurs. Zora's breath caught, her eyes locked on the screen. Kayla? The woman who'd mocked her accent, her clothes, her everything? Ethan turned to the crowd, his gaze fierce. "Zora Jackson's talent speaks louder than their lies. Her work deserves to be here, whole or not." The room erupted in applause, a tidal wave of support washing over Zora. Her cheeks burned, a mix of shock and gratitude flooding her chest. The auctioneer, recovering quickly, announced that Zora's piece was still in the running. Bids climbed fast. $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, numbers Zora couldn't even wrap her head around. She stood frozen, her eyes darting to Ethan. He was watching her, a faint smile tugging at his lips, his blue eyes holding something she couldn't quite name. As the crowd thinned, Zora approached him, her voice shaky. "Why'd you do that? You don't even know me." Ethan's smile widened, soft but deliberate. "I know enough to see you don't belong behind that coffee counter. Your art, it's real. That's rare." She studied him, her heart still racing. There was something about him, a quiet intensity, a warmth beneath his guarded exterior that made her want to trust him. But trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, not after Caleb. Still, she managed a small smile. "Thank you, Ethan. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," he said, his voice low. "Just keep painting." He walked away, leaving her standing there, the weight of the night settling into her bones. Her painting, ruined but celebrated, had made her a name. But who was Ethan Brooks, and why had he risked so much for a stranger like her? Months earlier, Willow Creek, Tennessee. The sun dipped low over Willow Creek, painting the wheat fields gold and casting long shadows across the red dirt roads. Zora Jackson stood on the creaky porch of her mother's clapboard house, a sketch pad balanced on her knee. Her pencil danced across the page, capturing the rolling hills she'd known her whole life. At 25, she was a dreamer in a town that didn't have much room for dreams, especially for a black girl from the wrong side of the tracks. Willow Creek was small, its community of black families tight-knit but outnumbered, living in the shadow of unspoken divides. Zora's mother, May, had raised her alone, working long hours at the local general store to keep food on the table. May was a force, graying hair pulled back, eyes sharp with wisdom and love, but even she couldn't shield Zora from the sting of Caleb Ward's betrayal. It had happened right here, on this porch, under a humid summer sky. Caleb, with his easy grin and promises of forever, had been Zora's world. They'd sit on the porch swing, her head on his shoulder, dreaming of a life beyond Willow Creek. She'd given him everything, her heart, her trust, her sketches, believing he saw her the way she saw him. But love wasn't enough for Caleb. "I need more, Zora," he'd said that night, his boots kicking up dust as he paced. "You're too ordinary. I want a girl who shines, someone who can keep up with me, not one stuck in this nowhere town." Zora had stood there, frozen, a glass of lemonade trembling in her hand. Before she could speak, a red convertible roared up, and Vanessa Holt stepped out, long legs, designer heels, blonde hair catching the moonlight. She was everything Zora wasn't. Rich, white, polished. Caleb climbed into the car beside her, not looking back as they sped off, leaving Zora alone in a cloud of dust. She'd sank to the porch floor, tears blurring the world. For weeks, she'd drifted through life like a ghost, ringing up groceries at the general store with a smile that never reached her eyes. Whispers followed her around Willow Creek. "Poor Zora," folks would say, shaking their heads. "Too plain for a guy like Caleb." The words burrowed deep, planting doubts she couldn't shake. Was she really nothing because of her simple life? Did her skin, her roots, make her unworthy of love? But one quiet night, alone in her room, something shifted. Zora sat staring at the sketches pinned to her wall, drawings Caleb had never bothered to understand. Those lines, those shapes, were hers, a talent he couldn't take away. She pulled an old suitcase from under her bed, her hands steady with a new resolve. "If he thinks I'm nothing," she murmured to the empty room, "I'll show him he's wrong." The next morning, she stood at the Willow Creek bus stop, the sun breaking over the horizon. May wrapped her in a tight hug, her gray eyes misty but proud. "You've got more fire than he'll ever know, baby girl," May said. "Go burn bright." Zora nodded, gripping her ticket to Chicago, a city she'd only seen in magazines. As the bus engine roared to life, she took one last look at Willow Creek, the only home she'd ever known. This wasn't just a trip. It was her chance to rewrite her story, to rise from the ashes Caleb left behind. Chicago, present day. Chicago hit Zora like a freight train. The city was all noise and motion, honking cars, towering skyscrapers, and crowds that moved too fast for her to keep up. She clutched her portfolio of sketches close, a lifeline from the life she'd left behind. At 25, she was a stranger here, a small-town girl chasing a dream in a place that felt too big, too cold. Her curls swayed in the wind as she navigated the crowded streets, her brown eyes wide with awe and uncertainty. With help from her friend Talia Brooks, a sharp-tongued fashion assistant who'd moved to Chicago years ago, Zora found a cramped apartment to share and a job at Brew and Grind, a bustling coffee shop a block from Cole Creative's sleek headquarters. The pay was barely enough to cover rent, but it was a start. She tied an apron around her waist, her hands shaky as she poured her first cup of coffee. The shop was a whirlwind of sharp suits and sharper voices, customers barking orders without a glance her way. Her sketches stayed tucked in a drawer at home, too precious to share in a city that didn't know her name. But invisibility wasn't the worst of it. Kayla Pierce, the 28-year-old shift leader, ran Brew and Grind like her personal kingdom, with sleek dark hair, crimson nails, and a smirk that could cut glass. Kayla sized Zora up the moment she walked in and found her wanting. "What's a country girl doing in Chicago?" Kayla said on Zora's first day, loud enough for the other baristas to hear. They laughed, a chorus of mockery that followed Zora as she wiped down tables. "Listen to that accent," Kayla added, mimicking Zora's soft southern drawl. "Did you ride in on a tractor?" The words hit like a slap, but Zora forced a smile, swallowing the hurt. She was here to survive, not to fight. Not yet. Day after day, the taunts piled up. "Those clothes," Kayla sneered one morning, eyeing Zora's simple sweater. "Did you pull them out of a barn?" The baristas joined in, calling her country mouse behind her back, loud enough for her to hear. Each jab chipped away at her, echoing the doubts Caleb had planted. Too plain, too poor, too out of place. At night, Zora lay awake in her tiny room, the city's hum seeping through the thin walls. She wondered if she'd made a mistake, but she kept showing up, head high, determined to prove she belonged, even if no one else believed it. One gray afternoon, a man walked into Brew and Grind, and everything shifted. He was tall, with dark brown hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through the chaos of the shop. He ordered a black coffee, his voice low, and took a seat near the counter, a notepad in hand. Zora barely noticed him at first, too busy dodging Kayla's latest jab. But when a pencil slipped from her apron pocket, rolling toward him, he picked it up, catching a glimpse of the napkin she'd left behind, a sketch of a coffee cup, swirls weaving into something alive. "This yours?" he asked, holding out the pencil. Zora turned, her cheeks flushing. "Just doodling," she said, her southern accent soft but clear. "It's beautiful," he replied, his tone genuine. "You've got a gift." She smiled, a small, hesitant thing, before hurrying back to work. Their conversation was brief, just a handful of words, but it lingered with her as she scrubbed counters later that day. His name was Ethan, he'd said. Ethan Brooks. There was something about him, a quiet strength, a flicker of kindness that stayed with her, a rare spark in a city that had been nothing but cold. Back at her apartment that night, Zora pulled out her sketches, tracing the lines with her finger. Maybe, just maybe, she thought, this place could be more than a battleground. Maybe it could be a beginning. If you're loving Zora's journey so far, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment to let us know what moment got your heart racing. We're just getting started. And trust me, there's plenty more drama and fire waiting in Chicago. Don't miss it. The Chicago morning was gray, the kind of heavy, damp air that clung to Zora Jackson's skin as she pushed through the revolving door of Brew and Grind. The coffee shop was already alive with the hiss of espresso machines and the sharp clatter of ceramic mugs. The air smelled of roasted beans and burnt milk, a scent that had become as familiar to Zora as the red dirt of Willow Creek. She tied her apron around her waist, her fingers moving on autopilot, and braced herself for another shift. At 25, she was still a stranger in this city. a black woman from a small Tennessee town trying to carve out a space in a world that seemed determined to push her out. Her first week at Brew and Grind had been a blur of spilled coffee and barked orders. But it was Kayla Pierce who made it feel like a battlefield. Kayla, the 28-year-old shift leader, ruled the shop with a smirk and a tongue sharper than a switchblade. Her dark hair was always sleek, her crimson nails tapping impatiently on the counter, and her eyes sized Zora up like she was a stain on the floor. "Country girl thinks she's gonna make it in Chicago?" Kayla had said on Zora's first day, her voice loud enough to draw snickers from the other baristas. "Good luck with that." Today was no different. Zora was wiping down the table when Kayla's voice cut through the hum of the shop. "Hey, country mouse, you missed a spot." She pointed at a perfectly clean table, her lips curling into a mocking smile. "Or is cleaning too hard for someone who grew up in a barn?" The baristas nearby laughed, a chorus of cruelty that made Zora's cheeks burn. She forced a smile, gripping the rag tighter. "Got it," she said, her southern drawl soft but steady. She wasn't here to fight. She was here to survive. But Kayla's words stung, echoing the ones Caleb Ward had left her with. Too ordinary. Not enough. They burrowed into her, planting doubts she thought she'd buried back in Willow Creek. Zora moved to the counter, pouring espresso with a practiced hand, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought of her sketches, tucked away in a drawer in her cramped apartment. They were her refuge, the one place where she could be more than the country mouse Kayla saw. But showing them to anyone in this city felt like baring her soul to a room full of strangers. Chicago didn't know her, and she wasn't sure it ever would. The apartment Zora shared with Talia Brooks was a shoebox on the edge of the South Loop, all peeling paint and creaky floors, but it was a lifeline. Talia, a 27-year-old fashion assistant with a quick wit and a wardrobe that screamed confidence, had been Zora's anchor since she'd arrived. That night, Zora sat cross-legged on the worn rug, a sketchpad open in her lap. The room was lit by a single lamp, casting a warm glow over her curls as she penciled in the details of Willow Creek's rolling hills. The faint sound of jazz drifted from Talia's Bluetooth speaker, a nod to the music they'd grown up with in Tennessee. Talia sprawled on the couch, scrolling through her phone, her braids swinging as she glanced at Zora. "Girl, you're gonna wear that pencil down to a nub," she teased. "Why don't you show those drawings to someone? They're fire." Zora shook her head, her fingers pausing on the page. "Not yet. Folks here, they're not like home. They'll tear 'em apart." Talia sat up, her brown eyes narrowing. "Zora Jackson, you didn't drag your butt all the way to Chicago to hide your talent. You've got something real. Don't let that witch Kayla or anyone else make you think otherwise." Zora managed a small smile, but the doubts lingered. "It's not just Kayla. It's everything. This city's so big, Talia. What if I'm not enough for it?" Talia leaned forward, her voice firm. "You listen to me. Chicago's tough, but you've got fire in you. Always have. You just gotta let it burn." Zora nodded, but the weight of the city pressed down on her. She thought of Ethan Brooks, the guy from the coffee shop, and the way he'd called her sketch beautiful. It was a fleeting moment, but it had stayed with her, a flicker of warmth in the cold. She pushed the thought away. He was just a customer, nothing more. Later that night, restless and unable to sleep, Zora opened her laptop, the screen casting a blue glow across her tiny bedroom. The city's hum seeped through the thin walls, sirens, laughter, the distant rumble of a train. She scrolled aimlessly until she stumbled across an online art forum, a corner of the internet where artists shared their work anonymously. On a whim, she created an account under the name Creek Artist and uploaded a scan of her Willow Creek sketch. Her heart thudded as she hit post, half expecting no one to notice, but someone did. A user named Brooksart commented within minutes. This is soulful. It feels like home, wherever that is for you. What's the story behind it?" Zora hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Something about the comment felt genuine, not like the empty praise she'd heard back home. She typed a reply. "It's Willow Creek, Tennessee. My home. I draw it to remember who I am, even when I'm far away." Brooks Art responded almost instantly. "I get that. I've lost pieces of home too. Your lines, they carry weight. Keep going." The exchange was brief, but it lit something in Zora's chest. For the first time since arriving in Chicago, she felt seen, not as a barista, not as a small-town girl, but as an artist. Over the next few days, their messages grew longer, deeper. Zora shared how she'd come to Chicago to escape a past that broke her, though she didn't mention Caleb by name. Brooks Art confessed he'd been burned by people who valued his status over his heart. "Sometimes I wonder if anyone sees the real me," he wrote one night. Zora replied, her fingers trembling. "I think I see you. At least I'm trying to." The forum became her lifeline, a place where she could be honest without fear. She didn't know who Brooks Art was, but his words were a tether, pulling her through the long shifts at Brew and Grind. The next morning, Zora was behind the counter, steaming milk for a latte, when Kayla's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. "Earth to country mouse," Kayla said, tossing a rag at her. "You gonna daydream all day, or are you actually gonna work?" Zora caught the rag, her jaw tightening. "I'm working," she said, keeping her voice even. But Kayla wasn't done. She leaned in, her crimson nails glinting under the fluorescent lights. "What's with you lately? You think you're some kind of artist now?" "Newsflash, Zora. Doodling doesn't make you special." The baristas snickered, and Zora felt the familiar sting of humiliation. She wanted to snap back, to tell Kayla she was more than this apron and this shop, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she turned away, focusing on the coffee machine, her hands steady despite the ache in her chest. During her break, Zora slipped into the back room, a cramped space that smelled of cleaning supplies and stale pastries. She pulled out her sketch pad, her pencil moving furiously across the page. She drew the coffee shop, but not as it was. Her version was alive with color, the customers faceless but vibrant, the counter a canvas of swirls. It was her way of reclaiming this place, of making it hers. She was so lost in the drawing that she didn't hear Kayla approach until it was too late. "What's this?" Kayla snatched the sketchpad from her hands, her eyes narrowing as she studied the page. "Oh, please. You think this is art? It's just scribbles." "Give it back," Zora said, her voice low but firm. Kayla smirked, holding the pad just out of reach. "Why? So you can keep pretending you're something you're not?" Before Zora could react, Kayla tore the page out, ripping it in half with a deliberate slowness. The sound of the paper tearing was like a knife to Zora's heart. She lunged forward, but Kayla dropped the pieces to the floor and walked away, her laughter echoing in the small room. Zora knelt, gathering the torn sketch, her hands shaking. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wouldn't let Kayla see her break. Not here. Not now. That evening, Talia found Zora sitting on the apartment floor, the torn sketch taped back together in her lap. "What the hell happened?" Talia asked, dropping her purse and kneeling beside her. Zora's voice was barely a whisper. "Kayla. She tore it up. Called it scribbles." Talia's eyes flashed with anger. "That jealous little Zora, you can't let her get to you. She's just mad because you've got something she'll never have." "What's that?" Zora asked, her voice breaking. "Heart," Talia said, "and talent. You're the real deal, girl. Kayla's just noise." Zora managed a weak nod, but the weight of the day pressed down on her. She thought of Caleb, of his words on that porch in Willow Creek, She thought of Kayla's smirk, of the barista's laughter, and then she thought of Brooks' art, of the stranger who saw her sketches and called them soulful. She opened her laptop, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, and typed a message. Today was rough. Someone tore up my work, made me feel small again. Why is it so hard to believe in myself? Brooks' art replied within minutes. Because the world's loud and it drowns out the truth sometimes. But your art? It's louder than their noise. Don't let them dim your light, Creek artist. Zora read the words, her throat tightening. Whoever this person was, they were starting to feel like more than a stranger. They were a spark in the dark, a reason to keep going. The next day, Zora was wiping down tables at Brew and Grind when Ethan Brooks walked in. Her heart did a little flip. The memory of their last encounter, the pencil, his compliment, still fresh. He ordered a black coffee, his blue eyes catching hers as she handed him the cup. Rough day? He asked, nodding at the tension in her shoulders. She laughed, a small, nervous sound. You could say that. He leaned against the counter, his voice low. You know, you've got this spark. Don't let this place dull it. Zora's cheeks warmed, and when their fingers brushed as she handed him his change, a jolt ran through her. His touch lingered a moment too long, his eyes locked on hers, and for a second, the chaos of the shop faded away. She could smell the faint cedar of his cologne, feel the warmth of his hand against hers. Then Kayla's voice barked from the back, Zora, move it! And the moment shattered. Ethan smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. See you around, Zora. As he left, Z, not to mention the faint smell of rain on his skin, she watched him go, her pulse still racing. Kayla's taunts, Caleb's betrayal, the torn sketch, they all felt a little less heavy. Maybe Talia was right. Maybe she did have fire in her. And maybe, just maybe, Chicago was starting to see it. The Chicago skyline glittered beyond Zora Jackson's bedroom window, a maze of glass and steel that felt both thrilling and intimidating. She sat cross-legged on the floor of her tiny apartment, her sketch pad open, a pencil dancing across the page. The room was dim, lit only by a flickering lamp and the soft glow of her laptop screen. Jazz hummed from Talia's speaker in the living room, its soulful notes weaving through the air like a warm embrace. Zora's curls spilled loose over her shoulders, her brown skin catching the light as she drew, a vibrant reimagining of Brew and Grind. The coffee shop transformed into a canvas of color and life. It was her rebellion against Kayla's cruelty, her way of claiming a piece of this city. At 25, Zora was still finding her footing in Chicago, a black woman from Willow Creek, Tennessee, chasing a dream that felt just out of reach. The past few weeks had been a grind. Kayla's taunts, the torn sketch, the endless shifts at the coffee shop, but there were glimmers of hope. Her late-night chats with Brooks' art on the art forum had become a lifeline, his words a reminder that someone, somewhere, saw her. And then there was Ethan Brooks, the guy from Brew and Grind, whose brief compliments and lingering glances made her heart do things she wasn't ready to name. Talia poked her head into the room, her braids swinging as she leaned against the doorframe. Girl, you're gonna burn a hole through that paper, she said, a teasing grin on her face. What's got you so focused? Zora looked up, a shy smile breaking through. Just trying to make something mine. You know how it is. Talia nodded, stepping inside and plopping onto the bed. I know, but you gotta show the world what you've got, Zora. These sketches, they're not just doodles, they're you. Zora's fingers paused on the page. I want to, but every time I think about it I hear Kayla's voice, or Caleb's, telling me I'm not enough. Talia's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. Screw them. Caleb's a fool, and Kayla's just jealous. You've got fire, Zora. Don't let them snuff it out. Zora managed a nod, Talia's words settling into her like a spark. She thought of the forum, of Brooksart's latest message. Your art feels like a story only you can tell. What's holding you back? She hadn't answered yet, but the question lingered, pushing her to take a risk. The next morning, Zora was wiping down the counter at Brew and Grind when she overheard two customers talking about an open art contest hosted by Cole Creative, the advertising and art empire just down the street. The winner would get a spot in an upcoming exhibit, a chance to be seen by Chicago's elite. Zora's heart skipped a beat. This could be it. Her shot to prove she was more than the country mouse Kayla mocked. That night she sat at her laptop, the contest's website glowing on the screen. The rules were simple. Submit a piece anonymously through their online forum. No names, no credentials, just the work. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, doubt creeping in. What if her art wasn't good enough? What if they laughed at her small-town roots? But then she thought of Talia's words, of Brooksart's encouragement, of Ethan's quiet belief in her. She uploaded a sketch of Willow Creek at dusk, the wheat fields bathed in gold, and hit send. Her breath caught as it disappeared into the void, a piece of her heart now out in the world. She leaned back, a mix of fear and excitement swirling in her chest. For the first time since arriving in Chicago, she felt like she was fighting for something bigger than survival. A few days later, Zora was steaming milk at Brew and Grind when a familiar face walked through the door. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't Ethan this time. It was Landon Hayes, Caleb's older brother. Landon was 30, a lawyer with a polished look that screamed success, tailored suit, close-cropped beard, and a smile that carried a hint of nostalgia. Back in Willow Creek, he'd been kind to Zora, always checking in on her when Caleb was too busy chasing his own dreams. She'd sensed something more in his glances back then, but she'd been too wrapped up in Caleb to notice. Zora Jackson, Landon said, his voice warm as he approached the counter. Never thought I'd see you in Chicago. She forced a smile, her hands busy with a coffee order. Landon, what are you doing here? Business, he said, leaning against the counter. But seeing you, that's a bonus. How's the city treating you? She shrugged, keeping her tone light. It's a lot, but I'm managing. His eyes softened, catching the strain in her voice. I heard about Caleb, what he did to you back home. I'm sorry, Zora. He's an idiot. Zora's smile faltered, the memory of that night on the porch flashing through her mind. Thanks, it's in the past. Landon hesitated, then lowered his voice. Look, I'm in town for a bit. Can I buy you a coffee sometime? Catch up? She glanced at him, surprised by the invitation. Part of her wanted to say no, to keep Caleb's world at arm's length. But Landon's sincerity was disarming, and the thought of a familiar face in this lonely city was tempting. Maybe, she said, handing him his coffee. I'll think about it. He grinned, slipping a business card across the counter. I'll hold you to that. As he left, Zora tucked the card into her apron, her mind spinning. Landon's kindness stirred old memories, of high school dances, of quiet moments when he'd made her laugh. But it also stirred confusion. She thought of Ethan, of the way his touch had sent a jolt through her. And Brooksart, the stranger who saw her soul through her art. Who was she becoming in this city, and who did she want by her side? The real turning point came a week later. Zora was in her apartment eating takeout with Talia when an email pinged on her phone. The subject line read, Cole Creative Art Contest, Finalist Notification. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. No way, she whispered, opening the email with trembling fingers. Dear Creek Artist, it began, we are thrilled to inform you that your submission, Willow Creek at Dusk, has been selected as a finalist in our open art contest. You are invited to present your work in person at our gallery event next week." Zora screamed, a sound so loud Talia nearly dropped her noodles.
"What? What's happening?"
Talia demanded, leaping to her feet.
"I made it!"
Zora shouted, shoving the phone at her.
"I'm a finalist! Cole Creative picked my sketch!"
Talia read the email, her eyes widening.
"Zora, this is huge! You're about to be a star!"
She pulled Zora into a hug, the two of them jumping around the tiny apartment, laughing until they were breathless. Zora's heart pounded with a joy she hadn't felt since leaving Willow Creek. Someone had seen her work, really seen it, and chosen it. For the first time, she felt like she might belong in this city, like her dreams weren't just fantasies. But as she celebrated, a shadow lingered. She hadn't noticed Kayla at Brew and Grind that morning, lurking near the counter, her eyes narrowing as she overheard Zora telling a coworker about the contest. Kayla's smirk was gone, replaced by something darker. She slipped her phone out, typing a quick message. "We've got a problem. That country girl's getting too big for her boots." Zora threw herself into preparing for the exhibit, spending every spare moment refining her sketch. She stayed up late, her hands stained with graphite, jazz playing softly as she worked. Her chats with Brooksart grew deeper, their messages a safe space where she could be vulnerable. One night, she typed, "I got into a big contest today. I'm terrified, but I'm also hopeful. Is that crazy?" Brooksart replied, "Not crazy at all. That hope? It's what makes you shine. Whoever gets to see your work in person is lucky." Zora smiled at the screen, her chest warm. She didn't know who he was, but he was starting to feel like a piece of her world, someone who understood her in ways she hadn't expected. A few nights later, Ethan Brooks showed up at Brew and Grind just as Zora's shift was ending. The shop was quiet, the evening crowd thinning out, and Zora was wiping down the counter when he leaned against it, his blue eyes catching hers. "You look like you're carrying a secret," he said, a playful edge to his voice. She laughed, surprised by how easy it felt to talk to him. "Maybe I am. What about you? You're always here with that notepad. What's your deal?" He grinned, tapping the notepad against his hand. "Just observing. Trying to find something real in this city." "You'd be surprised how hard that is." Zora raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And what's real to you?" He hesitated, his gaze softening. "Something that feels like it's got a pulse, like your sketches." Her cheeks warmed, and she busied herself with cleaning to hide it. "You've only seen one. Don't get too excited." "Then show me more," he said, his voice low, almost a challenge. "There's a bar down the street, quiet place. Come with me after your shift. We can talk art, or whatever else you want." Zora's breath caught. The invitation was casual, but the way he looked at her, like he saw past the apron, past the doubts, made her heart race. She thought of Landon's business card, still tucked in her drawer, and the safe distance of her chats with Brooksart. But Ethan was here, real and close, and the pull was undeniable. "Okay," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But I'm holding you to that quiet part." He laughed, a warm sound that lingered as he left. An hour later, Zora found herself at a dimly lit bar, the kind with exposed brick walls and a jukebox playing old soul tunes. Ethan was already there, a glass of bourbon in hand, his jacket slung over the chair. They talked about art, about Chicago, about the way the city could make you feel invincible and invisible all at once. When a slow song came on, Ethan stood, offering his hand. "Dance with me." Zora hesitated, her pulse quickening. "I'm not much of a dancer." "Neither am I," he said, his smile disarming. "Come on." She took his hand, and he pulled her close, their bodies swaying to the music. His hand rested on her lower back, warm through the thin fabric of her shirt, and she could feel the steady rhythm of his breath against her cheek. The air between them crackled, charged with something she couldn't name. She caught the faint scent of cedar on his skin, mixed with the bourbon on his breath, and her heart thudded so loud she was sure he could hear it. "Your trouble, Ethan Brooks," she murmured, her voice teasing but shaky. He chuckled, his lips brushing her ear as he whispered, "Only the good kind." They were inches apart, their faces close enough to kiss, and for a moment, Zora wanted to close the gap, to let herself fall, but the memory of Caleb's betrayal flashed through her mind, and she pulled back, her smile tight. "I should get home," she said, stepping away. "Early shift tomorrow." Ethan nodded, his eyes searching hers, but he didn't push. "Fair enough. But this isn't over, Zora." She left the bar, her skin still tingling from his touch, her mind a tangle of want and fear. As she walked through the Chicago night, the city's lights blurring around her, she felt a shift. The contest, Ethan, Landon, Brooksart, they were all pulling her in different directions, but they were also waking something inside her, something fierce, something that refused to stay small. The Chicago air was thick with the promise of rain, the kind of heavy gray that made the city feel like it was holding its breath. Zora Jackson stood behind the counter at Brew and Grind, her hands moving on autopilot as she poured espresso for a line of impatient customers. The shop was a blur of noise, steaming milk, clinking coins, and the sharp voices of the morning rush. Her curls were tied back in a hasty bun, her brown skin glistening with a faint sheen of sweat under the fluorescent lights. At 25, she was a black woman fighting to hold her ground in a city that seemed to push her down at every turn. The past week had been a whirlwind. The email from Cole Creative, naming her a finalist in their art contest, had lit a fire in her chest. Her sketch of Willow Creek at dusk was going to hang in a real gallery, seen by people who mattered. It was a chance to prove she was more than the country mouse Kayla Pierce mocked, more than the ordinary girl Caleb Ward had left behind. But with that hope came pressure, a weight that settled into her bones as the exhibit loomed closer. Kayla was relentless. Zora could feel her shift leader's eyes on her, cold and calculating every time she moved through the shop. "Don't get too cocky, country mouse," Kayla had said that morning, her crimson nails tapping the counter. "You're still just a barista, no matter what little contest you think you've won." The baristas snickered, their laughter a familiar sting, but Zora kept her head down, her jaw tight. She was used to it by now, used to being overlooked, underestimated, but it didn't make it hurt any less. Her only refuge was her art and the connections she'd found in Chicago. Late-night chats with Brooksart on the art forum had become her anchor, his words a steady hand pulling her through the chaos. And Ethan Brooks, the man who'd called her sketches beautiful, was starting to feel like more than a customer. His visits to Brew and Grind were frequent now, each one leaving her with a flutter in her chest and a question she wasn't ready to answer. What did he want from her? What did she want? The trouble started mid-shift, when a familiar voice cut through the shop's noise. "Well, well, still slinging coffee, huh?" Zora looked up, her stomach dropping. Caleb Ward leaned against the counter, his dark hair slicked back, his suit crisp and expensive. Beside him stood Vanessa Holt, her blonde hair cascading over a designer coat, her sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. They were a picture of wealth and arrogance, everything Zora had never been.
"What are you doing here?"
Zora asked, her voice steady despite the ache rising in her chest. "Business," Caleb said, his eyes flicking over her apron with a smirk. "Vanessa's got me set up in a penthouse now. You'd never get that, Zora, stuck here with your little doodles." Vanessa laughed, a high, brittle sound, and adjusted her sunglasses.
"She's cute,"
she said to Caleb, her tone dripping with condescension. "In a quaint, small-town way." Zora gripped the counter, her knuckles whitening. The memory of that night in Willow Creek, the dust from Vanessa's convertible, Caleb's cold words flooded back. Too ordinary. She wanted to snap, to tell them they didn't know her, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she forced a smile, handing Caleb his coffee. "Enjoy your day," she said, her voice tight. Caleb tossed $1 onto the counter as a tip, his grin smug. "Keep dreaming, Zora. Some people just don't climb." They turned and left, their laughter trailing behind them like smoke. Zora stood there, her hands trembling, the old wounds splitting open. Too plain, too poor. For a moment, she was back on that porch, watching Caleb drive away, her heart breaking into pieces. She finished her shift in a daze, the shop's chatter fading to a dull roar. That night, Zora sat alone in her apartment, the city's hum seeping through the thin walls. Talia was out, working late on a fashion shoot, and the silence felt suffocating. She opened her laptop, her fingers trembling as she logged into the art forum. Brooksart had messaged her earlier, asking about the contest, but she hadn't replied. Now, with Caleb's words echoing in her head, she typed, "Saw someone today who tore me apart once, made me feel small again. I'm scared I'll never be enough for this city." Brooksart's reply came quickly. "They're blind, Creek artist. You're more than they'll ever see. That contest? It's proof. You're not small. You're a damn supernova." Zora read the words, a faint smile tugging at her lips. His faith in her was a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge. She didn't know who he was, but he was starting to feel like a piece of her strength, a voice that drowned out the noise of Kayla and Caleb. She pulled out her sketch pad, determined to keep going. The exhibit was in 2 days, and she'd been refining her piece, adding layers of color and depth to the Willow Creek fields. She worked late into the night, jazz playing softly, her hands steady with purpose. This was her chance to show the world who she was, and she wouldn't let anyone, not Caleb, not Kayla, take it away. The morning of the exhibit, Zora arrived at the Cole Creative Gallery early to set up. The space was all sleek lines and soft lighting, a far cry from the dusty roads of Willow Creek. Her painting hung on the wall, framed and lit, the golden fields glowing under the spotlight. She stood beside it, her borrowed black dress hugging her curves, her curls swept back, her heart pounded with a mix of pride and nerves. This was real. She was here. But when she stepped closer to her painting, her breath caught. Red paint streaked across the canvas, ruining the delicate lines she'd spent weeks perfecting. The fields were a mess, dripping red onto the floor, unrecognizable. "No," she gasped, her voice breaking. "What happened?" The gallery manager, a stern man in a gray suit, appeared beside her, his tone clipped. "Looks like you got careless, Ms. Jackson. Ruined your own piece." Zora shook her head, tears welling. "I didn't do this. I swear I—" "No excuses," he cut her off. "This is a professional event. We'll keep it up for the auction, but don't expect much." Whispers spread through the crowd. Artists, collectors, critics, all eyeing her with pity or disdain. "Clumsy amateur," someone muttered. "Small-town mistake," another said. Zora stood there, helpless, watching her chance slip away. She thought of Caleb's smirk, Kayla's mockery, the doubts that had haunted her since Willow Creek. Had she been a fool to think she could belong here? She fled to a quiet corner of the gallery, her borrowed dress wrinkled, her spirit bruised. Pulling out her phone, she logged into the forum, her fingers trembling as she typed to Brooksart. "Everything fell apart today. Someone destroyed my work. I don't know if I can keep going." She hit send, tears blurring the screen, and sank against the wall. The city's lights twinkled beyond the gallery windows, mocking her with their brilliance. She'd come to Chicago to rewrite her story, but now it felt like the story was writing her. Small, broken, invisible. Ethan Brooks sat in his office at Cole Creative, the city sprawling beyond his glass walls. He was 29, a billionaire who'd built an empire. But tonight, he was just Ethan, the man behind the Brooks Art alias, scrolling through the contest submissions on the forum. Zora's sketch, Willow Creek at dusk, had stayed with him, its raw beauty haunting his thoughts. He didn't know she was Creek artist, didn't know the girl from the coffee shop was behind it, but her work pulled him in, a whisper of something he'd been searching for. When her message popped up, his jaw tightened. Someone destroyed my work. He read the despair in her words, felt a quiet anger rising in his chest. He didn't know who'd hurt her, but he knew this wasn't an accident. As CEO, he had access to the gallery's security footage, a perk no one else knew about. He pulled up the files on his laptop, his eyes narrowing as he watched the grainy video. Kayla Pierce, paint can in hand, splashing red across Zora's painting. Her face was clear under the lights, her smirk unmistakable. Ethan leaned back, his mind racing. He didn't know the full story, didn't know who was pulling the strings, but he knew Zora didn't deserve this. He typed a reply, his words firm. Don't give up, Creek artist. You're worth more than they know. I'll figure this out. He saved the footage, a plan forming. He'd been watching Zora from a distance, drawn to her quiet strength, her spark. Now she was more than a finalist. She was a fighter, and he wasn't about to let her fall. Back at the gallery, Zora was still in the corner when a shadow fell over her. She looked up, expecting the manager, but it was Ethan. He crouched beside her, his blue eyes soft but intense. You okay? He asked, his voice low. She shook her head, tears spilling over. It's gone, Ethan. My painting. Someone ruined it. They think I did it. He reached out, his hand brushing her cheek, wiping away a tear. The touch was gentle, but it sent a jolt through her, his warmth cutting through the cold. This isn't your fault, he said, his voice steady, and it's not over. She looked at him, confused but clinging to his words. His hand lingered on her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just them. She could smell the cedar of his cologne, feel the heat of his breath as he leaned closer. Her heart raced, a mix of fear and want swirling inside her. She wanted to lean into him, to let his strength hold her up, but the weight of the night pulled her back. How do you know? She whispered, her voice trembling. Because I see you, he said, his eyes locked on hers. And I'm not the only one. He stood, offering his hand to help her up. She took it, her fingers curling around his, the contact grounding her. They didn't speak, but the air between them was charged, a silent promise that something was shifting. As they walked back into the gallery, Zora felt a flicker of hope, fragile but real. Caleb's words, Kayla's cruelty, the ruined painting. They hadn't broken her. Not yet. But across the room, Kayla watched them, her smirk hidden behind a wine glass. She slipped her phone out, typing a message to an unknown number. She's still standing. We need to do more. The reply came quickly. Don't worry, I've got a plan. The Cole Creative Gallery buzzed with the electric hum of the auction night, a swirl of wine glasses, sharp suits, and whispered bids. The air was thick with anticipation, the soft clink of crystal mingling with the low murmur of Chicago's art elite. Zora Jackson stood near the back of the room, her hands clenched at her sides, her borrowed black dress wrinkled from the chaos of the evening. Her painting of Willow Creek's golden fields, streaked with red paint, hung on the wall, a ruined testament to her dreams. At 25, she'd fought to prove herself in this city, to rise above the ordinary label Caleb Ward had pinned on her. Now that fight felt lost. The gallery manager's words echoed in her ears. Ruined your own peace. The crowd's whispers stung just as sharp. Clumsy amateur, small-town mistake. Zora's curls fell loose, framing her warm brown eyes, which glistened with unshed tears. She was on the edge, ready to walk away, back to Willow Creek where no one expected her to shine. But Ethan Brooks had changed everything. His bold move, revealing Kayla Pierce's sabotage on the gallery's security footage, had turned the tide. The bids for her ruined painting were climbing, and the crowd's applause still rang in her ears. Yet as she stood there, watching Ethan blend into the shadows, she felt a new kind of unease. Who was he really, and why had he fought so hard for her? The auctioneer's voice boomed, pulling her back to the moment. Next up, Zora Jackson's piece, Willow Creek at dusk, damaged but still in the running. The bid soared. $30,000, $50,000, numbers that made Zora's head spin. She clutched her note card, her heart pounding with a mix of shock and gratitude. She was a name now, not a nobody, but the victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the betrayal of her painting's destruction and the unanswered questions about Ethan. As the event wound down, Zora stepped outside, the cool Chicago air brushing her skin. The city's lights twinkled, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside her. She was still reeling, her painting saved, her name rising, but her spirit bruised. Before she could process it, a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking her path near the gallery's entrance. "Zora, wait," Caleb Ward said, his voice cracking. He looked different, his suit rumpled, his dark hair messy, his eyes wild with desperation. He dropped to one knee, grabbing her hands. "I messed up. Vanessa's dumping me. She found out I pushed Kayla to trash your painting. It's all falling apart." Zora stared, her warm brown eyes hardening. The sight of him, crumpled and pleading, stirred a storm of emotions, anger, pity, and a distant echo of the love she'd once felt. "You did what?" she asked, her voice low, dangerous. Caleb's words tumbled out, frantic. "I was jealous, okay? You were getting ahead, shining in ways I never could. I told Kayla to do it, thought it'd keep you down. But I was wrong, Zora. You're everything I should have fought for. Please take me back. I'm begging you." His grip tightened, his knees scuffing the pavement, a man undone. The crowd near the entrance turned, murmurs rising as they watched. Zora's heart raced, the weight of his confession pressing down on her. Caleb had orchestrated her pain, had tried to bury her dreams to protect his fragile ego, and now he was here, expecting forgiveness. Before she could respond, Vanessa Holt stepped out of the gallery, her designer dress catching the streetlights. Her face was a mask of fury. "You're a leech, Caleb," she snapped, her voice cutting through the night. "Using my money to play your pathetic games. We're done." She spun on her heel, her stilettos clicking as she stormed off, leaving Caleb crumpled on the ground. "Zora," he pleaded, looking up at her, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I was blind." She pulled her hands free, stepping back, her voice cold. "You chose glitter over heart, Caleb. You thought I was too simple, too poor to matter. Live with it." She turned away, her spine straight, her borrowed dress swaying as she walked. The crowd whispered. Some snapping photos. Caleb's humiliation spreading like wildfire. He'd climbed on Vanessa's wealth, mocked Zora's simplicity, and now he'd lost it all. A king toppled by his own throne. Zora didn't look back. The weight of his betrayal lifted, replaced by a quiet strength she was only beginning to know. But the night wasn't done with her. Back at her apartment, Zora was still processing Caleb's confession when Talia burst through the door, her braids swinging, her eyes wide with urgency. "Girl, we need to talk," Talia said, tossing her purse onto the couch. I ran into Landon Hayes at a networking event tonight. He's been asking about you." Zora frowned, sitting on the rug with her sketch pad. "Landon? What's he want?" Talia hesitated, then dropped the bomb. "He told me something about your boy Ethan. He's not who you think he is, Zora. Ethan Brooks is Ethan Cole, the billionaire who owns Cole Creative." Zora's heart stopped. The room spun, her sketchpad slipping from her hands. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Talia nodded, her expression grim. "Landon's been digging. Ethan's been posing as some regular guy, but he's the CEO. The contest, the gallery, it's all his. He's been playing you, Zora." The words hit like a punch. Ethan, the man who'd saved her painting, who'd called her sketches beautiful, who'd made her feel seen, was a lie. She thought of their moments at Brew and Grind, the bar, the way his touch had set her skin on fire. Had it all been a game? A rich man's whim? She grabbed her phone, her hands trembling, and logged into the art forum. Brooks Art, Ethan, had messaged her after the gallery. "You're stronger than they know, Creek artist. I'm proud of you." The words, once a lifeline, now felt like a betrayal. She typed a furious message. "Who are you, really? Did you think I wouldn't find out?" His reply came almost instantly. "Zora, I can explain. Please meet me. I never meant to hurt you." She slammed the laptop shut, tears streaming down her face. Talia sat beside her, pulling her into a hug. "I'm sorry, girl," Talia murmured. "But you deserve the truth." Zora's mind raced. Ethan's kindness, his intensity, the way he'd fought for her at the gallery. It had felt real. But how could she trust him now? She thought of Caleb, of his lies, and the fear of being hurt again clawed at her. "I need to get out of here," she said, her voice breaking. "I need to go home." The next morning, Zora was on a bus to Willow Creek, her old suitcase thumping against the seat. Chicago's skyline faded behind her, replaced by the rolling hills and red dirt roads of Tennessee. The air smelled of earth and memory, grounding her as she stepped off the bus. Willow Creek was unchanged, sleepy, small, its black community, a tight-knit pocket in a town of quiet divides. Zora's mother, May, was waiting at the stop, her gray hair tied back, her eyes twinkling with love. "Baby girl," May said, pulling Zora into a tight hug. "You look like you've been carrying the world." Zora managed a weak smile, tears threatening to spill. "Feels like it, Mama." They walked to May's clapboard house, the porch swing swaying in the breeze. Inside, the smell of cornbread and collard greens filled the air, a comfort Zora hadn't realized she'd missed. Over dinner, she told May everything. Caleb's betrayal, Kayla's sabotage, Ethan's deception. May listened, her hands folded, her face a mix of pride and concern. "You've been through a storm, Zora," May said, her voice steady. "But you're still standing. That's your fire. Don't let no man, rich or poor, dim it." Zora nodded, but the hurt lingered. What if Ethan's just like Caleb? What if I'm not enough for someone like him? May leaned forward, her eyes fierce. "You listen to me. You're enough for anybody, but most of all, you're enough for you. Love ain't about what they think. It's about what you choose. And if this Ethan's worth it, he'll fight to show you his heart." Zora let the words sink in, her mother's strength wrapping around her like a blanket. That night, she sat on the porch, sketching under the stars. She drew herself, not the broken girl Caleb had left, but a woman standing tall between Willow Creek's fields and Chicago's skyline. It was raw, honest, a reflection of the fight she was still waging. As her pencil moved, she felt a spark reignite, a resolve to face whatever came next. Ethan didn't let her go so easily. 3 days later, Zora was walking through Willow Creek's fields, the wheat brushing her legs, when she heard a car pull up. She turned, her heart lurching as Ethan stepped out, his city polish traded for a sweater and jeans. His dark hair was mussed, his blue eyes searching hers across the golden expanse. "Zora," he called, his voice carrying over the wind. "We need to talk." She crossed her arms, her jaw tight. "You've got some nerve showing up here." He closed the distance, stopping a few feet away. "I know I messed up. I should have told you who I am. But I swear, everything I felt, everything I said, it was real." "Real?" she snapped, her voice rising. "You lied to me, Ethan. You let me think you were just some guy, not a billionaire playing games. How am I supposed to trust you?" His face fell, but he didn't back down. "I wasn't playing games. I hid my name because I'm tired of people seeing my money instead of me, my ex. She used me, Zora, bled me dry for my status. I wanted to know you, the real you, without all that baggage." Zora's throat tightened, his words hitting too close to home. She thought of Caleb, of the way he'd chosen Vanessa's wealth over her heart. But Ethan wasn't Caleb, and that scared her even more. "You should have trusted me," she said, her voice breaking. "I deserved that." "You're right," he said, stepping closer. "I'm sorry. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. I see you, Zora. Your art, your strength, your fire. I'm in love with you." The words hung between them, raw and heavy. Zora's breath caught, her heart pounding. Before she could respond, a sudden rain poured down, soaking them in seconds. Ethan grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a nearby barn, its weathered wood creaking as they ducked inside. They stood there, dripping wet, the air thick with the scent of hay and rain. His sweater clung to his frame, her curls plastered to her face, and the space between them crackled with tension. "Zora," he said, his voice low, urgent. He reached for her, his hands cupping her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. "Tell me you feel this too." Her heart raced, fear and want warring inside her. His touch was electric, his breath warm against her skin, and for a moment she let herself lean into him. Their lips met, a kiss that was all fire and need, his hands sliding to her waist, pulling her close. She could feel the heat of his body through her wet clothes, the steady rhythm of his heart against hers. The kiss deepened, hungry and desperate, a release of everything they'd held back. But then she pulled away, her breath ragged, her eyes searching his. "I can't," she whispered. "Not yet. I need time, Ethan." He nodded, his hands dropping to his sides, his expression a mix of hope and pain. "I'll wait," he said. "As long as it takes." She turned, stepping back into the rain, her skin still tingling from his touch. The fields stretched before her, golden even in the storm, and she knew she was at a crossroads. Ethan's love was real, but so was her fear. As she walked away, the rain washing her tears, she felt the weight of a choice she wasn't ready to make. The Chicago skyline stretched beyond the windows of the Willow Creek Gallery, a new storefront where art met heart. The space was alive with color. Paintings of Tennessee fields and city streets hung side by side, their vibrant hues catching the soft glow of string lights. The air smelled of fresh paint and coffee, a nod to Zora Jackson's roots at Brew and Grind. At 25, she stood in the center of it all, a black woman who'd risen from the ashes of Willow Creek, Tennessee, to claim her place in this city. Her curls were loose, cascading over her shoulders, her warm brown eyes sparkling with a pride she'd fought hard to earn. Her navy dress hugged her curves, simple but elegant, a far cry from the borrowed gown she'd worn at Cole Creative months ago. Tonight was the gallery's opening, a celebration of Zora's journey and a platform for other young artists, especially those from marginalized communities. The crowd buzzed, collectors, locals, and a few familiar faces from her Chicago life. Talia Brooks, her best friend, flitted through the room, her braids swinging as she charmed a group of fashion insiders. Mae Jackson, Zora's mother, stood near a painting of Willow Creek, her gray hair tied back, her smile radiating quiet strength. But Zora's eyes kept drifting to the door, searching for one person: Ethan Cole. It had been weeks since their rain-soaked confrontation in Willow Creek, since his confession of love, and that searing kiss in the barn. Zora had returned to Chicago, her heart torn between fear and hope, but she hadn't seen Ethan since. She'd thrown herself into building the gallery, a dream she'd never dared to voice until now. Her ruined painting from the Cole Creative exhibit had sold for a staggering sum, enough to fund this space, and her name was starting to ripple through Chicago's art scene. But without Ethan, it felt incomplete. The memory of his betrayal, hiding his identity as the billionaire CEO of Cole Creative, still stung. Yet his actions at the gallery, saving her work from Kayla's sabotage, and his raw honesty in the rain had cracked her defenses. She'd spent nights sketching, pouring her confusion into a new piece, one she'd unveiled tonight. It was her truth, her heart, and maybe, just maybe, a bridge to him. The crowd grew hushed as Zora stepped onto a small platform, a microphone in hand. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied, carrying the weight of her journey. "Thank you all for being here," she said, her southern drawl soft but clear. "This gallery is more than a place for art. It's a home for stories, mine, yours, and those of artists who've been told they don't belong. My story started in Willow Creek, Tennessee, with a girl who thought she was too small for the world. Tonight, I'm here to tell you she was wrong." The room listened, heads nodding, as Zora gestured to a covered canvas behind her. "This is my newest piece. It's not just art, it's me, all the pieces I've carried and fought for." She pulled the cloth away, revealing a painting that drew gasps from the crowd. It was Zora herself, standing between the golden fields of Willow Creek and Chicago's towering skyline, her figure bold against a swirl of color. Her eyes, painted with fierce determination, seemed to hold the room captive. The crowd erupted in applause, and Zora's chest swelled with a pride she hadn't known she could feel. But then the door opened, and Ethan Cole stepped inside. His dark hair was neatly combed, his blue eyes locking onto hers across the room. He wore a tailored jacket, no longer hiding behind the plain clothes of Ethan Brooks, but his presence carried the same quiet intensity she'd fallen for. Zora's breath caught, her heart pounding as he moved through the crowd, stopping at the edge of the platform. "Zora," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Can I say something?" The room fell silent, all eyes on them. Zora nodded, her throat tight, unsure what to expect. Ethan stepped onto the platform, facing the crowd, his gaze never leaving her. "I'm Ethan Cole," he said, his tone steady. "Most of you know me as the head of Cole Creative. But to Zora, I was Ethan Brooks, a guy trying to find something real in a world full of masks. I messed up. I hid who I was because I was scared she'd see my money and not me. But the truth is, I see her, her art, her strength, her fire, and I'm in love with her." The crowd murmured, some gasping, others smiling. Zora's eyes widened, tears brimming as Ethan turned to her, his voice softening. "I'm sorry, Zora, for the lies, for the hurt. But I'm here now, and I'll fight for you every day, if you'll let me." Her heart raced, the room fading until it was just them. She thought of Willow Creek, of Caleb's betrayal, of the doubts that had nearly broken her. She thought of May's words, "Love is about what you choose." And in that moment, she chose. "I see you too, Ethan," she said, her voice trembling but sure. and I'm scared, but I'm choosing you." The crowd erupted in cheers as Ethan closed the distance, pulling her into his arms. Their lips met, a kiss that was all fire and promise, his hands framing her face, her fingers curling into his jacket. The room spun, the applause a distant hum, as they held each other, two souls finding home. His breath was warm against her lips, the faint cedar of his cologne mingling with the paint-scented air, and Zora felt a certainty she'd never known. This was real. Months passed, and Zora's life transformed. Willow Creek Gallery became a beacon in Chicago, its walls showcasing artists who'd been overlooked. Black, Latinx, queer, working class. Zora split her time between the city and Tennessee, her paintings gracing magazines and galleries. She and Ethan built a life together, their evenings filled with coffee-fueled talks about art and dreams. His penthouse, once a sterile fortress, was now warm with her sketches and laughter, a home where they chose each other every day. Talia found love with a designer she'd met at the gallery opening, their banter lighting up the room. Landon Hayes, after a quiet conversation with Zora, moved on, starting a relationship with a colleague who shared his quiet strength. May visited often, her stories of Willow Creek weaving into their new world, her cornbread a staple at gallery events. Caleb Ward's name drifted through Willow Creek like a ghost story. He'd returned to the town he'd sworn to escape, working the counter at the general store, his dreams of wealth shattered. Vanessa had cut him loose, and whispers of his sabotage spread, leaving him isolated, a man who'd bet on glitter and lost the heart he should have held. Zora heard the news from May, felt a pang of pity, but let it go. He'd made his choice, and she'd made hers. Kayla Pierce faced her own reckoning. Fired from Brew and Grind after Ethan shared the security footage with the shop's owner, she vanished from Chicago, her ambitions crumbling under the weight of her jealousy. Zora didn't dwell on her, focusing instead on the artist she was lifting up, the community she was building. One crisp evening, Ethan drove Zora back to Willow Creek, the road winding through familiar fields. The sun dipped low, painting the wheat gold, a scene straight from her paintings. They stopped at the edge of town, the air thick with the scent of earth and memory. Ethan pulled a small canvas from the car, handing it to her. It was his painting, a portrait of Zora at the gallery opening, her curls catching the light, her eyes alive with strength. "You're my masterpiece," he said, his voice soft but sure. Zora touched the frame, her throat tight. "And you're mine," she replied, stepping closer. "From that first forum message, I think." He smiled, pulling her into his arms, and they kissed, slow and certain, the fields whispering around them. The moment was simple but profound, a promise forged in the ashes of their pasts. As they stood there, the sun sinking below the horizon, Zora felt whole, not just an artist, not just a survivor, but a woman who'd claimed her place. Back in Chicago, the gallery thrived, its doors open to anyone with a story to tell. Zora and Ethan worked side by side, their love a steady flame that warmed the space. May's visits brought laughter and cornbread. Talia's energy kept the events alive, and the artists they supported carried their dreams forward. It was a life Zora had never imagined, born from a heartbreak, a bus ticket, and a spark that refused to die. One night, as Zora locked up the gallery, a letter slipped under the door. She opened it, her eyes widening at the words, "Dear Ms. Jackson, we are thrilled to invite you to exhibit your work at the Galerie Vivienne in Paris, a showcase of emerging global artists." Her heart raced, a new dream unfolding before her. She turned to Ethan, who was waiting by the door, his smile knowing. "Paris, huh?" he said, pulling her close. "You ready for this?" She laughed, her eyes sparkling. "Only if you're coming with me." He kissed her forehead, his arms warm around her. "Always." The city hummed beyond the gallery, alive with possibility. Zora didn't know what Paris would bring, what challenges they'd face, or how their love would grow. But she knew they'd face it together, two souls who'd stumbled through shadows to find each other. The road ahead was uncertain, a canvas yet to be painted, and that was enough. Thank you for joining Zora and Ethan on this incredible journey. If you loved their story, hit that subscribe button, share it with a friend, and drop a comment to let us know what moment stole your heart. Will Zora and Ethan conquer Paris? Or will new challenges test their love? Stay tuned to find out what's next for these two flames. Your support keeps their story burning bright.